just really thrilled to be able to do. This is going to be a little bit different than what you normally hear here at UPW, because we're not going to be interviewing Peggy. I am going to be interviewing Peggy. And we will hopefully, we're going to work towards, can't promise it, but we're going to work towards having possibly some questions and answers at the end. We'll see how the time goes. We'll see how long-winded Peggy is and how short-winded I can be. But we'll just kind of see how God leads us and what He has. So I want to introduce my friend Peggy.
Do I have a microphone?
We're going to use this.
Oh, we're going to share one. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to share a microphone because she's going to be doing most of the talking.
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask her some questions. So, I've known Peggy for a long time. I've watched her in church just as we've kind of both grown through the ages and are older now than what we used to be when we first met. But Peggy she's been a hero of mine, and she doesn't know I'm going to say this, but it's because of that person that is a strong woman, and yet one who just loves and follows her husband, and she has children that she has raised, incredible children, and she loves Jesus. And as she's been in the working world and in the media, where you're just attacked all the time, she's just been my hero. So I'm just really thrilled to be able to sit here on the stage with her and to be able to ask her questions and lead her into you being able to see her heart, not just who she is in the world, but who she is in her heart and what her heart is for Jesus. So that's where we're wanting to go today and see it. So many of us know her from years of Channel 8. She was the reporter for Channel 8 and later ABC News, where you covered religion and culture for 20 years. So did you always want to be a journalist? And how did you get into that position of being a journalist?
Okay. Well, first, let me thank you, Charlene, for that really kind introduction. We have known each other for years, and I admire you too. And believe it or not, I spoke here to this group in 1997. That's crazy. Someone just reminded me before I spoke that I was here when you spoke in 1997, and here's the letter I wrote you. So I've done this before, and the group has changed over the years, and it's so fun to see all of you. I wish I knew each of your stories, because it would help me know better what to talk about. By the time you get my age, for those of you near my age, you've probably lived a dozen stories. You've lived a lot of different lives, and that's why I told Charlene I'd love to have a Q&A time to see what other people want to know. But anyway, to answer that question, I did work right downtown for about 13 years at Channel 8 covering religion, and then for another 7.5 at ABC News, total of 20. And then I went on to World Vision, where I hosted and edited international radio show, like a public radio show on justice and poverty in the developing world. So I've always been in journalism. And I think what led me into that, there's so much I could say about that, but I had a crazy childhood, like many of you probably did too. But mine was really crazy. When Charlene was saying, would you just share honestly about the things you've been through? I said, Charlene, we don't want to perform some kind of freak show in front of your women. I'll just say, and oh, you're trouble. Is that better? Okay. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I'll say that again. So when Charlene asked for me to share more personally, I said that would be like a freak show. So I'll just give you the summary. And my sister is here today. I feel really accountable with her here because she went through it all too, and she has to listen to me say it and not be able to speak for herself. Anyway, my sister and I were kidnapped when I was 7 and she was 10. See, we already got, I don't want this to be a freak show. We were kidnapped by our father, taken off in the middle of the night to Mexico and later the West Indies. our mother, who was a Jewish refugee from Nazi Germany, later committed suicide. We grew up with my father and his 23-year-old secretary, our stepmother. They had a baby on the island of Barbados. We were running from the FBI. Freak show, I'm telling you. Like, how many of you have stories to top that? Charlene, I said, this will not help. People will not relate to me. But I've never told it in that short of time. Usually, when I go somewhere, people say, where did you grow up? And I go, oh, Mexico, Barbados, Ohio, Oklahoma, Florida. Oh, was your dad in the military? This is how it always goes. Was your dad in the military? No. Oh, was he in the oil business? Well, kind of. Did he work for the whatever? No. Well, why did you travel so much? Well, he just kidnapped us. And then people kind of, anyway, that was our childhood, which was another lifetime ago. But what I want to say about that craziness was it led me to always ask questions. From the time I was little, I remember thinking, why are we here? What is the meaning of life? Where's my mother? Why is my father like this? What happened? Why am I in the jungle today? Why am I in a Mexican school where nobody speaks English and I don't speak a word of Spanish? What? I was constantly trying to make sense of the world. So I just asked questions all the time. So when I finally got free out of my house to go to college, University of Texas, my dad told me to major in home ec so I could become a good wife. I went to the home ec department and the science requirements were too difficult. So I tried dental hygiene. I liked being outdoors, so I tried PE. I could be a coach. And then I stumbled into a journalism class. At about the same time I stumbled into Jesus. A woman came and spoke on the campus about Jesus. And it turned my life around to think there could be a heavenly Father totally different than my father, and a whole way of life that would put all the puzzle pieces together and make sense out of all my questions. And I did journalism and I found this journalism class at the same time. I thought, you mean I could spend a lifetime asking questions of important people, interesting people? And I specialized in religion and culture. And so I interviewed President Clinton, I interviewed President Bush, I got to interview every cult leader, I interviewed the heads of the Catholic Church, I got the Baptists. I got to ask questions about religion after I'd met Jesus to everybody. And you know, if you're doing that not as a reporter, it can be offensive, but I got to ask every offensive question I wanted and get paid to do it. So for years, that's what I did, and I loved it. It was an amazing job. I got married, I had 2 kids, but that's why I went into journalism. Does that answer that question?
It does.
Yes, and that's a good reason. And one of the things that I always loved about Peggy is when you see her interviewing some of these different religious people around the world, it was always interesting because she had to be neutral and yet hold on to her conviction tightly. And she always did that very well. So that was one of the things that I loved about her. So what did you do after you? Well, you.
Well, you want me to explain that, how you do that first? Because people always ask that. Let me just say this. I was neutral because for me as a journalist, and you might laugh because there's a lot of trouble in the media today, a lot of trouble with my profession, and it's very sad. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it's a real threat to democracy, what's happened to the media. So the way I was trained and grew up in the media, it was completely in sync with my faith. That my job was to explore and ask questions, not to put my agenda out there. It would have been sin for me as a Christian to try to twist it, flip it, make the Christians look better than the Buddhists. I used to have friends say, man, I saw you interview that cult leader the other day and you smiled at him. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I? Right. Well, didn't you want to make your side look better? I said, do you want reporters to make their side look better? No, I trust God with the results. Yes. My job was to always find the truth as clearly as I could, despite my unconscious bias, which I couldn't get rid of my unconscious bias, but I, in honesty before Jesus, could lay my personal bias aside, knowing that if I simply told the Christian side, because usually it's not even included. For me, it was just, let's not leave this out. Let's not leave this point of view out. If I told it well and allowed other groups or people who were opposed to Christianity to tell their view well, I could trust God with the hearts and minds of the viewers. And that was my philosophy. And that's what journalists are supposed to do. So Christianity and journalism go hand in hand to me. A good Christian doesn't play God as a journalist. And too many of our journalists today have an agenda. And we've become, just like the church has, somewhat tribalized by political idealism. And we've forgotten that politics is not going to deliver us. Just this. Oh, thank you.
Good answer. I like that. You've heard this before. I wish you'd come back and report the truth that's
I
out
am
there
now.
today.
Okay.
Well,
you know what I'm doing now?
Yes. What are you doing now?
I'll ask your questions for you. So for those of you, so here's what's interesting. All these years, I've interviewed other people and reported on their stories. Whether it's, I covered all the issues of homosexuality, gay ordination. Man, I watched that go all the way from the 70s to where we are today. Nothing in society has moved so rapidly from one direction to another as our total difference in sexuality and sexual identity. I mean, it's like your head spinning, right? But also I covered all abortion, which is pretty much stayed, the country's pretty divided still, the same on abortion, although the country has totally changed on issues of LGBTQ issue. The vast majority now, it's gone from, I don't know what the statistics are, maybe used to be, I don't know. Although this next generation is totally different than an older generation. But on abortion, it's pretty 50-50. So anyway, I was the abortion queen reporter and the gay reporter, because those were the issues the church was fighting over most. So I always had to stay, like I said, detached from my own personal views, even though I had them when I reported. And I highly, highly valued reporter objectivity. There is no such thing as total objectivity, because none of us see things objectively, but to try as hard as you can to be objective. So after all these years, when I retired, some of you have shared about retiring, I struggled for a while. I mean, what am I going to do? I tried, just like I majored in home ec and then this and this. I tried everything. I taught ESL classes. I volunteered here. I moved to Chicago. I did some crazy things, trying to figure out where my place was, and it was kind of scary sometimes. Like I thought, well, maybe my life's over. You know, I lost my husband in 2008. And my children, one was in Greece, one was in Chicago. I came back to Dallas, and I was like, you know, it's downhill from here. And I don't know if any of you know the Enneagram. Anyone know about the Enneagram? Okay, I'm a number 6, which is the worst is yet to come. My husband's a number 7, which is the best is yet to come. Anyway, I'm pretty sure my life was over. But without going into too much detail about the story, I was speaking at an SMU event, and people came up to talk to me afterwards, and this man came up that I recognized. I hadn't seen him like in 25 years, and he was my former boss's boss's boss at Channel 8, the head publisher of the Dallas Morning News in Belo. And he handed me his card. He said, call me. We need you. And I was like, forget, no way, I'm done. I've been done with that for a long time. And I didn't call. Next thing I know, I get a letter. Please come see me. We need you. We want something. We would like for you to write for us. I thought, no way. I'm done. I'm finished. I was volunteering in public schools to help children cope with grief and loss. I was doing ESL. I was doing different things. My daughters had moved back. So finally, I said, I'll meet with you for lunch. Because he tracked me down through the old anchor man I worked with, Tracy Rowlett. Remember that? I ran into Tracy Rowlett, who I hadn't seen in years, and Byron Harris, a reporter, in a restaurant. They went, what's his name? Not Robert Decker, but
Pete Delphus?
No, my friend.
Your friend.
My friend, the boss. The boss's boss. They said, he's looking for you, and he's reached out to us. He's looking for you. I said, fine, I'll call him back. So I met him downtown for lunch, and he said, how would you like a regular column in the Dallas Morning News? I said, no way, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. He said, but I think you do. I just heard you give a speech. I said, I have nothing to say. I'm done. And that was on a Friday. And I said, thank you so much. It's so good to see you. Those were the good old days. I have nothing to say. An op-ed, I had taught myself forever, don't tell your own point of view. So I went home that night, went to bed on a Friday night. I told the Lord, I have nothing to say. Saturday morning, I woke up about 6:30 a.m. with something to say. And I wrote it down, because I've journaled. I probably have 100 journals. I journaled this thing, and I thought, he won't like this. He wanted me to do about politics and religion. I hate that topic. So I wrote about love and marriage. I wrote this beautiful essay I felt called to write, and I sent it to him to teach him. I said, here's what I like to write. See what you think of this. And they published it. It was about why I should stop nagging my husband, my new husband. How not to nag your husband, or something stupid but profound. It was about Lent. And anyway, I gave up nagging my husband for Lent. That's what it was. Anyway, they published it, and the response was overwhelming. I was like, and they said, dude, give us more. And I'm like, really? Like, isn't it a sin to tell? I trained myself to not let your personal opinions out. So I have been writing and writing and writing. Did y'all, have any of you, no one reads the Dallas Morning News?
Oh, yeah.
Jan, have you read it? My daughter's pays it some on. I had a piece on Easter. I've had so much fun. And what I've learned is, in the back half of your life, this is what I feel now. I'm 63. Like, if I don't have something to say about what God has taught me through all of my valleys and problems and career, if I can't be courageous enough to use the gifts God has given me as a writer to say my opinions, if people have asked for them and want them, then why am I saying no to God on these things? So I have had this rebirth as a journalist, but as an op-ed writer, and I have a piece right now that the New York Times is going to run. So that's what I'm doing now. So just, ladies, right when you think it's over, really, I call it, and I said it in my Easter piece, when I wrote, why do I keep believing? How do we believe this crazy stuff? That God rose someone from the dead and that he's coming back? Are we nuts? He's coming back and going to make everything right? And I said, I can't prove it, but one of the reasons I believe it is because of all the little resurrections I have known in my life. Mm-hmm. And we have to be women of hope, that we believe. I mean, think of how long Moses waited. Think of how long people wait. We wait for little resurrections. And maybe we wait until the big resurrection. I don't know. But it's in God's timing. And I've experienced unimaginable resurrections. So.
Thank you, Peggy. That's great. That's totally off of what we talked about talking about, but you know what? We asked the Holy Spirit to move.
Yeah, you told me to let the Holy Spirit move. Charlene was worried that I wasn't going to be personal enough. I told her I'll talk about this. She goes, could you just talk from your heart? I'm like, Charlene, it's a freak show if I talk from my heart.
It's never a freak show with you talking. And I do have to say, though, I can't even imagine you not having anything to say. I've never seen that in you. So I would have to disagree with that statement, but I'm glad that
publicly.
I'm
in the newspaper. That's so public.
That's very public, and it's in writing.
Yeah.
So anybody can always look at it. So that's what
I've got in trouble. But when you get this age too, you don't care that much about that.
That's true too.
People say terrible things to me, and I just say, Lord, are they right or are they wrong? They're wrong. I know what I wrote, and I know why I wrote it, and I'm always open to criticism, but if it's criticism just because someone has a different political view or a different religious view or whatever it is, it just rolls right off my back now. It's wonderful being old. It's not good not worrying all the time if you're pleasing everybody.
That absolutely. That's a very nice privilege of getting old. So some people might not know this. So let's just touch on how you got to be the worldwide religion reporter for Peter Jennings. Just kind of tell that story, because some of us might not know.
Here, I told you I wanted to talk about that, but I'm past that now.
I know. So we have to move back a little bit, but some people might not know.
Does anybody remember Peter Jennings? Yes. So I was working here at Channel 8. And I had 2 children, and nobody could have prepared me. As many of you know, one woman mentioned up here, the greatest struggle of a woman's life is how to be a great mother and a great career woman at the same time. It was juggling those 2 things. So I was going to quit because I really felt like my children needed me at home, and I had nannies, and it wasn't working out. And my boss at Channel 8 let me work part-time. I was the first woman to get pregnant in the newsroom, and the first one to be able to go part-time. And I, again, being worst-case scenario person, thought, it's over. My career's over. I've just got my big toe in the door. I was reporting just a couple of days a week with 2 young children. And one day, meantime, in another universe in New York, Peter Jennings, for 3 years, had been agitating the executives at ABC News that we need to cover religion. He had covered the wars in the Middle East. He was always covering Israel, Lebanon, and he said religion is a big part of the world. And they were going, no, nobody covered religion. And he was the 600-pound gorilla, so they finally said, fine, if you want a religion reporter, you go find her. So he went to this big RTNDA radio TV news directors meeting where all the news directors in the country come, and he got up at the podium and he said, does anyone know anyone in this country who covers religion at a major market TV station? Well, of course, there was one. So I got a call while my toddler Hannah was riding her big wheels across the hardwood floors. I was at home grieving the loss of my career when a phone call comes in from Peter Jennings, and he said, hello, is this Peggy Wehmeyer? And I said, yes. He said, this is Peter Jennings in New York, and I have 2 questions for you. And I wanted to say, yeah, right, and I'm Barbara Walters. I did not believe. He said, is it true that you cover religion, and are you willing to make a major life change? So it would take a book to write what happened. But I said, I went up and flew up there just to meet him and see him, and they hired me. And I had to navigate again with the children, and that's a whole story in itself, that I always put my kids first. And no women were working part-time at the time at ABC, and I said, well, I'll just tell this little story if you want. How are we on time?
Go.
Okay, so you have to have an agent, and ABC has their attorneys representing them to negotiate a contract, and I have an agent. And I said, well, I'll take the job if I can. I'm not moving to New York. You have a bureau in Dallas, and Dallas is closer to all the stories in America than New York City. You all think you're the center of the universe, but you're not. I can fly to every story to cover it from Dallas if you'll let me stay here and have a home office. And the attorneys said to my agent, she's crazy. No one has a home office. We don't do home offices. Nobody can do that. And I said, okay, thank you. I was very honored. I'm not taking the job. And then Peter Jennings called me and yelled at me. He said, what, you've been leading us along all this time? I said, no, I told you I'm a mother first. I'll do this, I'll jump on airplanes, but I have to have a home office. Why should I put on makeup and drive 45 minutes downtown and then back in rush hour traffic 45 minutes when I have 2 small children at home? I didn't ask for this job. So Peter Jennings went up to the 5th floor, it was Hanukkah, and all the leaders were pretty Jewish. I'm Jewish too, so I'm not being anti-Semitic. But he went up and he put a menorah down on the desk of the head attorney, and he said to him, his name was Steve Sadacario. He said, Steve had called me and said to me, we're not doing this. We're not shipping equipment to your home. You're not having a home office. Nobody gets to do it, and neither do you. I said, fine. He said, you've just passed up the best television, the best job being offered in network television today. I said, really? Well, you've just lost the best religion reporter in America. That was from the Holy Spirit. I'm not that kind of person. When it came out of my mouth, I couldn't even believe it. I was the only religion reporter. And that's what they wanted. So Peter called and got mad. Anyway, he went upstairs with a menorah, and he slammed it down on Steve's desk, and he said, Steve, get me Peggy Wehmeyer. The next day, I got a call from Steve Setacario. He said, what's your address? Where do we ship the equipment? And how much did you want? And I signed a contract with ABC News and my life changed.
Wow.
So, you know what? I know that when I listen to myself, I'm like, oh, she's so, I would just say this. Fight like hell for your kids. Even if it means you die to your career. Even if it means, I told my husband, I'll move into public housing if we can't afford to keep our house. Because these children, if you have children, there's nothing more important. And years later, at my age now, I look at how my children have been formed. You can't take all the blame if your children aren't turning well, and you can't take all the praise if they turn out well. But it's a little mix of all of it, as we know as women. And I am so grateful. If I could do it all over again, I would have even worked less, I think, now that I'm watching my children have careers and raise babies. I have a 21-month-old and a 22-month-old, and I'm seeing how important it is that we invest time and emotional energy and presence into our little children. So I'm glad I did it, and I think we should all fight for it. It's not all about women's rights. But men should be doing it too. It shouldn't all be on women. I am it's a tough one, men and women and children.
So, Peggy, that leads me into probably a concluding question for you that you don't know about.
Uh-oh.
So, but, as I've watched you off and on through the years, as you've loved your girls, you've taught them to be open, you taught them to look at truth, you taught them to love Jesus and to love people. And I've been able to watch those girls grow up. And by the way, both of her girls, I have to say this, have incredible singing voices. I've watched them as kids grow up in church singing, and they have the most beautiful voices that I've ever heard.
Thank you.
Just love them. And I know that's not necessarily what you have instilled in them either. But with all of that, I have to say that the apple didn't fall far from the trees on those girls. They're both successful. They're sharp, motivated, strong women. And not strong. Being a strong woman is not bad. Because it's usually it's what God has given us to do, and He has a reason for it. And that's who they are. One's a pastor, and one is an assistant DA.
A federal public defender.
Oh, a federal public defender now.
Let's get that right.
Let's get that right. Okay. And just very, very sharp women. So with that, what is the biggest legacy that you want to leave, to pass on down through your girls who are millennials now, to their children? So as we're looking out, because all of us in some way, we're looking towards the future. So what is the legacy in your truth-telling that you feel like you can leave for your daughters and your granddaughters to pass on, to run their journey, their path?
Well, that's a great question, Charlene, and it's multifaceted, but the first thought that comes to my mind was when I would put my girls to bed, I would sit and, first of all, we always were transparent and told the truth in our home. I won't even say whatever topic came up in school, however nasty, sex, whatever, we talked about it. And we talked about what Scripture said, what Jesus wanted. So there was always honesty, but I would always tell my children, we're here for the blink of an eye. God has a plan for your life. I guess what I would want them to know, and the script is never finished. We don't know. My kids are doing great right now, as Charlene, thank you, said. One's a pastor at Highland Park Methodist Church. The other is a federal public defender. But the main thing I want them to know and wanted to teach them, which I see them doing in their own unique way, is the righteous shall walk by faith and not by sight. To love God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. And in their generation, the church, I think, has failed to answer the questions of the mind, and many young people are leaving because of it. And so I say keep fighting for the answers. If it doesn't make sense, don't turn away, don't give up. Go the Jewish way, which is wrestle with God. Jacob wrestled with God. Wrestle with God until, don't give up the faith. So to trust God, not in a way where you lose your mind, but to commit all of your strength and mind and your soul to God, and see yourself as a servant of God, not somebody for whom God is supposed to be satisfying you and making your life better. And whether he leads you to a valley, whether he leads you to a mountain, to take what's in front of you and ask God, what are you asking of me? And to be brave and courageous in doing that. And right now they're in a difficult, both of them, because they have this 21-month-old and 22-month-old, and I am watching them like me. And it's horrifying to remember and watch them and not be able to tell them what to do. They don't want any advice from me. But I want to go, come back, spend more time with your kids. I wish I had, I'm seeing them wrestle with the same things I wrestled with, and God's calling them to this work. God's calling them to these things and calling them first to their children. But how do you do it all? And watching them navigate their young marriages. It's so interesting for all of us when we watch our kids do it, but I'm so thrilled at the way my girls are doing it right now. And yet I want to say that with some humility, because we never know. Life takes terrible turns sometimes. Remember, I'm a 6. Terrible things happen. And so I just, I'm always, it was so funny. We got in a car. My daughter and I were getting the kids in the car, and there was a little baby scooter behind the car. No baby was on it, but immediately I saw it and I could see the whole thing, a baby on a scooter, the car backing up, and I went, oh my gosh, that scooter. My daughter goes, what's the problem? The scooter's there, we'll just move it. I said, what if a child was on it? Mom, there's not a child on it, but there could be a child on it. That's what happens when you've been kidnapped and traumatized. It's funny, but it's true.
It's true.
You live with constant vigilance. And that's my biggest weakness.
But thank you, Peggy. I think you and Mark have left an incredible legacy for your girls.
Thank you.
That will continue on through their children.
Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you for being here.
So, Peggy, we know that you've probably made $1 million in your lifetime, and we wish we could give you another $1 million. But we only have 100 today, and we're going to donate it to World Vision in your name. So here it goes. And thank you so much for being here. This was absolutely awesome. And Peggy will be here to answer any questions that you may have after the luncheon. We also want to let you know, as they come down from the stage, that we recorded this session, and if you would like to get a copy, it's only $5, but if you are a corporate Vine sponsor, you can absolutely get this at no charge, and Andrea will actually be emailing out a link to this message that you can receive. Peggy, you said so many things, but I wrote down